happen. They want to know at another level of what's working, and we can track back to audience and segment, but the questions that we used to get in terms of where our ads are being placed, how the targeting is working, are becoming less frequent as they're having to do with more data sources. So as they're starting to now not just look at display or targeting, but they're looking at social data, seeing how that's performing, and with some of the modeling we're doing, looking at offline, they're not asking the questions of source or kind of quality and how that ties back to their traditional segmentation, but they're really wondering, well, what's really working? What are we driving towards in terms of performance, and how easy is it to change course? And as there's new technology to help kind of make changes in who you target quicker, and we're able to automate some of the processes, the source question kind of becomes less relevant to a lot of them as they kind of fine-tune the performance indicators.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about EGT and the client set. So I want to zoom in a little bit.
Sure.
Is it the way your agency is selling your services? Is it the nature of which industries your clients are in? Or do you think this is pretty much across the board from what you see?
You know what? There's definitely pockets of industry specificity. With EGT, we work really across both B2B and B2C clients. So whether we're working with like a writer on logistics, or we're working with Carnival or ADT, we're not seeing different trends, based on the models that they go after. I mean, certainly, if there's an offline reduction, if there's sort of an in-store purchase, some of that traditional segmentation is critical for them to understand how their larger programs are working. But when you're looking at booking a cruise, or you're looking at sort of a longer-term, B2B sort of cycle, you're not having that same sort of discussion as you would if you're kind of tying it to a coupon, and you're tying it to sort of a traditional in-store type of situation.
All right. Okay, Mike, you're next up. You're classified as an audience delivery platform. Besides telling us more about AudienceScience, how do you look at that? Are all audiences the same in your platform?
No. So if you look at, so I've been in this space maybe just a little less time than Gordon has. I'm a few years younger. But if you look at back in the day, mid to late 90s, I think probably one of the biggest challenges back then is there was a bit of data, but I think it was like we all approached it like you heard the old sort of adage of the 5 blind men and the elephant, right? So you grab the trunk, you think the elephant looks like a tree. You grab the tail, you think the elephant looks like a snake. So we're actually dealing with lots of different sort of disparate pieces of data, not really pulling all the pieces together. I think as we've done more things like behavioral targeting, remarketing, I think folks are starting to see sort of that bigger picture. And I think from what we're doing at AudienceScience, I think there's a couple things that come up. One is that you should always be testing. Number 2, different types of data work for different types of client needs. Right? So one example is bottom of the funnel DR type clients, right? So there's certain types of things that work really well for DR, which is primarily remarketing. And then there's other things depending on whether your goal is engagement or targeting a certain type of audience, targeting male or female, which is still difficult to do online, by the way. Right? So if you could target male or female at 90% confidence interval, CPG folks are real happy with you. Right? So it just depends on certainly the goals and objectives of the client. Right? And I think you really have to, especially if you're a big brand advertiser, you're going to really have to look at it in quite a holistic way. Right? So it's not first-party data versus third-party data. It's yes, I'm going to manage my first-party data, but what is the different type of third-party data that I'm going to use to augment my campaigns? Right? So we do a ton of work with our friends at IXI, and that's exactly what we do. They've got some great financial data. There's lots of our brand-related clients that want to tie in household data with financial data, and then we come up with the right mix.
Got it. Thanks. Andrew, you're next up. It struck me your company's having a 70-person team working on Google. So my guess is they're getting a lot of best practices. They're getting a lot of focus on some of these issues. But maybe talk a little bit more about some of the other clients and what you're seeing. I mean, is this ringing true for you? Andrew's talking about there's more and more sources, so it's getting a little more complicated. Mike suggesting some sources might be more desired than others. They may not perform as well or not. But as you're trying to service your clients, both Europe and U.S., what are you seeing?
I think definitely some echoing themes. I think in both of those examples, and whether in the Google team or outside of it, I think this slight schizophrenia around kind of the bottom of the funnel and the upper parts is a kind of trend I see again and again across the agency. Even inside our clients' operations, they kind of somehow behave like a two-headed snake. So I like a good DR campaign as much as the next guy. That's where I've done, I guess, mostly years of digital marketing. I spend more of my time now working on brand initiatives. I think for most of our DR kind of clients, for most of the DR teams within our clients' organizations, the role of data is fairly clear and assessed on this kind of very aggressive basis that Andrea describes. Is it working? If not, kill it, move on. I think for our brand clients, it's a much more difficult, much more involved conversation, and I think it's an area that people like ourselves have to work much harder to represent well. It's where trust issues are the most, I guess, deep-rooted, and I think it's where we're asking the most trust of our clients in particular. The length of the measurement cycle in brand initiatives makes it very difficult to ask a client to say, right, I want you to put $5 million behind this audience-based brand strategy and trust that it's going to be okay, and I'll tell you at the end whether we get the right people. And in that context, you're probably going to have to sacrifice some of the vanity that you might normally expect to derive from that type of activity, and put some faith in this model. And I think it's very difficult to ask for that faith at the moment. People still place a very high premium, and rightly so, on context and on position. And at the moment, the applicability of data in that environment is still quite challenging. It's hard to find readily traded hyper-premium positions. So I think it's the area that we're finding it hardest to figure out how to apply, particularly third-party data. First-party data, which we can report using an ad server cookie. We can start segmenting audiences, delivering customized creative experiences, delivering a really rich experience in that form. But I think in the kind of traded media segments is where we're having the toughest time having those conversations. To be honest, figuring out exactly what's right, because it's not easy to do.
Yep. Got it. Okay, great. So Quinn, is this resonating with you? What are you seeing with your clients?
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of, Andrew, what you just talked about with the prevalence of first-party data working really well, especially for a lot of our direct response initiatives that we're working on with clients. And a lot of that is just because we know their customers so well, and because we're using data from our CRMs, our analytics, and information that we inherently know about these people already. It's working extremely well for a lot of those DR initiatives. But if you're only focused on the bottom of the funnel for your clients, and you're not looking at amplification and looking at what's next for that brand, you're only focusing on people who are looking for you, rather than people who know about you, rather than your consumers who are out there who are unaware. And that's really where a lot of the opportunity lies, but also a lot of the risk lies with our clients. So it's getting them to trust us that these audience segmentation strategies are going to amplify their brand, are going to get them in front of new consumers, and help them develop a growth model that's sustainable. So I think that in a sense is kind of what we're seeing with our clients, and the difference between first-party and third-party data. It's educating them about what's going to work best for each strategy, getting them in on the ground floor, utilizing first-party data, and then hoping that we get really strong results from those campaigns so that we can continue to push forward in some of the third-party territories.
Andrea was talking about sources, and we were talking now distinguishing first and third party. There is a lot of third-party sources out there now, and a lot of people, I think, are starting to feel that they're all buying and selling the same data, and it's getting harder. And so maybe that plays into, Jeff, your world a little bit as we think about provenance and source, and clearly my guess is, and I haven't seen your price list, but you're probably getting a higher rate for some of your data than others. And so maybe talk about how that's working for you.
Right. I think some of the frustration you're hearing right up here and in the last couple of days is because there's such a proliferation of data. There's so much third-party data, and it's sort of what I've seen a lot of is people buying by label as opposed to truly going back and understanding what the data is all about. I will get back, Andrea, to your performance assessment. But my company's in a pretty good position because we get direct data feeds from the biggest financial institutions, about 100 of them, almost first party in a sense. In fact, that's how we came to be, is that these guys, like a Chase or a Fidelity, they had their data. They wanted to know about everybody else, to your point about sort of the folks that they weren't being exposed to. So that's what we gathered together. So as a result, we do feel we're a premium. We charge a premium for that. It doesn't translate to clicks, which I'll get to in 1 second. But I think the important thing is there's so much other data out there that we just don't know if it's legitimate or credible. And in the offline world, where I started from, we're used to that. We've already competed, and we're used to competing against survey data, which is good to a point, and obviously we feel our direct measure is better. But now there's just a lot of data that you might never be able to track back to its source, and that is much harder to describe as to why you're using it. And a lot of the media planners buy it just by label. I think that our particular problem in the current environment of performance assessment is everything's measured by click. For the most part, I know we're working harder, and what we sell is quality customers. And fortunately, I have good self-esteem. I know it's worked offline, and we have a lot of clients that say, we're going to keep using you for digital despite the CPA, because we know at the end you're getting good customers for us. But in most of the performance assessment, we don't drive clicks. It's a little bit of what you said. We're going to find the people that can afford the Mercedes. That might not be the same people that are raising their hands saying, gosh, I wish I had a Mercedes. So that's the challenge. So a lot of times we may not overperform on clicks, and a lot of standard assessments will say, stop using it. We need to drive the clicks. That's my job. And so you won't get to that perfect end client satisfaction, but you might not know that for months.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, well, I think, Jeff, that's a really good point, that there's probably different levels of extracting the data where you may not need clicks to kind of validate a higher cost if you're targeting a specific segment or you're driving something other than a specific conversion. And I think that where marketers, even us included, have had trouble historically is the clients were looking for like 1 or 2 specific measures because it's easy for them to digest. And when they're looking for something very easy, a click, a conversion, those are things that they understand, right? And so when we start to say, well, at higher end parts of the funnel where we're building audience, we're building history, it's going to cost more. So by the time that we're at a lower level, we have different metrics. Getting them right, that it really goes to your trust issue. Is you almost have to educate the client on their own customer life cycle, and then you can use the data that you're getting. And I think the value is that we're able to collect it a lot quicker, right? So at least we're able to say, look, it is working. Here are 3 proof points other than click-through that you're getting people to these stages or other behaviors. So I think getting past sort of that single or sort of dual metric is the first step. And if you can achieve that, then you can kind of start telling a story of price-based performance.
And just to add to that, I think I think one positive thing, and this relates back to the trust issue as well, is I do think that more and more brands are starting to look at advertising online more in terms of their own first-party data, their own user, versus only context or only a third-party data, right? So more and more brand clients are becoming more informed about that particular user. So when they do a buy, they can say to publisher or network or whatever, here's my user. So when my user appears on your site, I know that it's worth X to me. So I want every user like that that's worth X to me, right? So I think what's happening over the years is that the data and the data knowledge has been not just staying on sort of the publisher and network side, it's shifting more and more to the advertiser side, and I think that's frankly one of the reasons why the big brand advertisers have only spent about 4 or 5% of their budgets online, right? Because in the past they didn't really know what was going on, right? I think that they have a much better idea, so I think hopefully at least that's one of our goals is to get more of these brands to spend more online. Hopefully that's going to start opening up the floodgates.
Yeah, and I would just add one aspect of that I know folks are trying to drive, we're trying to drive, is the offline impacts of that advertising. So obviously we try and look through that funnel to the online, but also, besides what I was talking about earlier, what's the offline halo effect? Because we know it's there, and we just have to constantly send that message. That's where we start more of a movement, which is certainly justified.
I think something extremely interesting you mentioned, Jeff, is kind of the trend towards measuring real incremental value. And the Mercedes example is a great one, even if it sounds slightly snobby. I guess the thought for us is, I think we've now pretty much got all our clients measuring their digital media on an incremental basis. And when you start thinking in that way, and you start really looking at the bottom of the funnel for what it is, you know, your remarketing is maybe, if you're lucky, 50% incremental, and then your lookalike model is maybe, you know, 70% incremental, and so on and so on. But when you start being able to analyze different data sources on that incrementality basis, you start being able to measure and really apportion how your brand extension is performing against those different audience segments, and how that kind of hyper premium media offering is performing for you. It actually completely pivots the position of data in the marketing mix, and suddenly propositions like yours become a super premium media choice rather than, you know, a hyper targeted bottom of the funnel conversion.
Great point. It scares me a little bit. I think marketers in particular are smarter. There are definitely more sources. A lot of us are providing more tools, but I fear we're making the same mistakes we made in display a bit, where pricing and performance have odd measures, and if they thought display was complicated, this is really complicated, right? And it is hard to buy and sell data still. It is hard to put it together. So, Quinn, I mean, how does your agency look at this? I mean, my guess is, I mean, I see some of these brands, and whether it's Blue Bunny ice cream or Krispy Kreme or these are great sort of brands, and I don't know how sophisticated they are in data, but how much time are you spending just sort of getting them to get their arms around this, so they're not just jumping to that CPC, CPA, whatever it is at the bottom of the list?
Yeah, I think the key initially is getting that first-party data from the client, because a lot of them have active CRMs or have a lot of information about their clients. They have email lists. So getting that data and utilizing that to its fullest extent, because that's kind of the low-hanging fruit in terms of educating them and getting in front of their existing customers in the right way and in the least expensive way that we can. And then secondary to that is really is educating them about how to utilize third-party data and showing them, again, the struggle of the life cycle and some of these that are a lot harder to gauge back to an in-store purchase, for instance, especially when it's not an in-store purchase where you have a loyalty card that you're buzzing in each time. Those are a lot more, we have a lot more success with telling good stories about how data has been utilized and success stories with those types of clients that have a fully integrated CRM. But some of the others, it's really more of a story of getting input back from that client at the end of the quarter, the year, and showing some of the connections between what we've done and improvements in the targeting that we've made and the sales funnel on their end.
Great. I encourage you all to throw in case studies or client examples if you like. I want to go a little different direction around best practices and stuff. We talked about third-party data, and some are very comfortable with it, others aren't. I think I'll start with Andrew, actually, because the EU, their focus on privacy and data there, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I'd like to hear the difference between the UK and the US, and then maybe some of the clients are going to treat it differently. But I think some are actually scared of this, and I'm wondering, for instance, in your client base, do you do business differently in Europe than you do here because of this? I mean, my favorite term of the year so far was an EU term where they're trying to figure out, it's called the right to be forgotten, and how users on the web could literally, this is well beyond just not being cookied. But are you spending any time on that? Do your clients ask you for advice on that? Or do they care how data is being targeted or bought or found? How do you think through those issues?
Well, there's a ton of components to the question.
Pick one.
I did something very smart and left the UK just as the whole cookie law thing came in, so I dodged the bullet, but I can't dodge the bullet on the stage. So I think a few things. One is the market third-party data in Europe is way behind where it is today in the US. So when I dodged that bullet, I also had a lot to learn arriving over here. And lots of exciting stuff is happening, but there's a lot less liquidity and a lot less volume traded in the third-party data space. And first-party, or I guess I'm going to get my parties mixed up. First and fourth party maybe is where the cookie issues become most relevant. Unfortunately, it's not even about US versus UK, because every member state in the European Union has to interpret the EU legislation into local law. And for some countries that means you can't collect cookie data on exposure. For some it means you can't do retargeting without a disclosure notice. For some it means you have to opt in. For some it means you have to provide an opt out.
So no more global campaigns in data.
It's really, really tough, and it's going to get more and more difficult. Right now, actually, a lot of people are kind of going with a very, very basic attempt, and to be honest, just about fulfilling what you could sort of see as the minimum obligations. But increasingly, you're getting told off. A lot of our clients, being the types of brands that they are, have wanted to play it safe. So we've worked with, I have to say this is where it's almost impossible not to work with a specialist fourth-party provider in Evidon or HSD or whatnot, who will take charge of all of those kind of local intricacies and just deal with it for you. But it's tough, and it's particularly hard when you're, say, an Expedia or an eBay, and that first-party data is actually the absolute overriding essence of your display activity, which is becoming a CRM for a lot of our clients. Particularly for Expedia, particularly for eBay, they're really the two for whom the largest portion of their digital display investment today is going into what you would probably describe as CRM in a traditional marketing communications context.
One thing I want to add, we have an office in London and one in Hamburg as well, is it is a little bit different over there. I think if you look at the UK market, they're probably where we were, maybe a couple of years ago, in that it's still a pretty intensely CBA DR-driven marketplace, right? When you look at what all of the sort of big agencies are running there, it's all primarily performance-based. And then when you look at a place like Germany, Germany is primarily a publisher-driven market, right? When you look at the sell-through rates over there, it's probably 70-75% sell-through rate, right? So, each country is a little bit different, and they're handling it a little bit differently. I think probably the one sort of commonality that I have seen is that folks are doing more and more programmatic buying, right? I think there's even a higher percentage of programmatic buying in UK versus here, and they are trying to understand the first-party data a lot more than they used to. But like I said, at least for top of the funnel or mid-funnel type brands, I think the UK is still probably a little bit.
We're trying to catch up.
They're still trying to find all of the converters at the bottom of the funnel still.
All right, I'm going to do another shift here. Andrew, we're going to start with you. 2012, be remiss if we didn't talk about mobile a little bit. We've been talking a lot about cookies and web-based data. To what extent, and maybe a certain client or generally our clients, is data having a play with what you're doing in mobile?
Yeah, mobile for us really comes into play when we're looking at it coupled with geo. Because when you're thinking about mobile and you're thinking about location, then what we're really talking about is specificity. And the more that we know sort of where are you and what device you're on, the more we can start inferring, if you're SeaWorld, are you at a park? Could we be thinking about loyalty? If it's Carnival as our client, if you're in a harbor region, are you pre-board or post-board? What could we be targeting with? Even so it's not so much device from a mobile perspective, but what does the geo tell you about maybe where they are in an experience, and then what can we target them? So we're seeing a lot of it. The other thing that we're seeing, obviously, is a kind of a digital agency overall, is sort of the play of experience design in our advertising. And so whether we're looking at maybe things swipe versus click, right, and just the whole story of how we get people to activate is different online. And so I think that it's not just the content and where it's being delivered, but how easy is it to engage. And when you think about mobile, people have this tendency, right? They kind of put it in their pocket, they look at it for a few minutes, and then they go back. And so trying to engage mobile, I think it becomes more complicated because their attention span is shorter, and they have one hand versus two most of the time, maybe just a thumb. And so we need to look at mobile from an intent perspective, and we focus a little less purely on audience. We don't do a lot of CPG plans. So when we're looking at it, we're really trying to look at kind of what behaviors can we trigger from a mobile perspective.
Quinn, you have more CPG. What's going on with your roster in terms of mobile?
Yeah, in terms of mobile, I think that a lot of people make the mistake, or marketers or media buyers, of thinking that what's been successful on the desktop will also be successful on a mobile device. And on mobile devices, interruptions are a very unwelcome part of the experience. So you really have to think about geo is, again, a big element of interacting with your mobile consumers, and knowing what types of activities they're taking place with and how they would prefer to interact with your brand on mobile devices is important. I think that just creating a display targeting audience or segmentation and pushing that to a mobile device is a big mistake, because how many of you have purposely clicked on a banner ad on a mobile device in the past week? You may have on accident, but it's not really a well-used part of the mobile experience yet. And I think that I think the last session that was in here was talking about developing ad units more natively to devices and sites. And I think that the mobile industry, from a display perspective, still has a long way to go to make it make sense in a mobile space. There still are a lot of things that we're testing, we're trying from a mobile perspective, but right now I think earned media is really where you're going to have the biggest wins on the mobile side.
I would just add that personally we've only stuck our toe in mobile, but I think that's probably indicative of data in general for mobile, as well as we learned our lessons in display to wait till things settle down a little bit. But I do think some data companies will have an advantage over mobile, and others that are so cookie-based they won't be able to translate. I mean, they're going to have to figure out how to integrate if possible. Because most of my data is location-based, that's actually welcome area for me, as would be set-top box. That I'm sort of right there because I'm going to lose some of my competitors in the process.
I think we all kind of dream of a world where you can identify an individual from their desktop to their mobile device to their set-top to their tablet, and right now that just isn't prevalent, and it's not really possible for us to target individuals in that way yet. So it's an exciting part of the space, knowing that someday that may be something that we'll all be able to be a part of, but right now it makes it really difficult.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the public's dream. That's our dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, come on, leading the way. You know what they want. So, Mike, can you pick up on that a little bit? I mean, back when I first started working at your company, contextual was so important, and clearly, I think for a lot of people it still is. But so are we just spent 45 minutes talking about challenges to that business or additions to it?
No, I mean, I think it's more additions to it, right? I mean, I think so. If you're in an environment where the advertiser knows their user, right, and can come to the publisher and say, hey, look, I know my user. Then the publisher can focus on, hey, great, I need to figure out what my content is to drive those kind of users to my site, right? So then the publisher focuses on what they're really good at. The advertiser focuses on what they're really good at. So I think as we talk to brands, big brands still want to be associated with other big brands, right? I think there's a lot of value to that. Although now they're doing it with a little bit more intelligence, right? So they're saying, hey, I want to be associated with this brand, but I also know the user that's coming, and based on the type of user that's coming to your site, put this ad, right? So it's much more one-to-one based than just general. But I'm a big believer. I think in these times of lots and lots of sites and lots of different places to see ads and content, I think brands matter, and will continue to matter even more.
It's an interesting cycle, I think, and maybe what we were talking about earlier with so many new sources now of third party. Actually, I thought I was doing pretty well. I understood first party and third party. Somehow we lost second party, and then Andrew's introduced fourth party. So if you think this data thing is getting any easier, it's not. But I will take a step out there a bit and say that yes, I think there are now so many sources out there. I think there's been a lot of kind of horse trading focused on price and performance, and not so much on provenance. And I do think you have brands fighting back a little bit too and thinking about first party. My last 3 years at the Journal, Fidelity would come in every year and say, the bad news is we're cutting your ad budget and we're going to spend less with you. The good news is we want to buy more you-dos. We want to engage our users. We want more users on our site. We want to start collecting the data ourselves. And so I think this is heading in a direction that will, I think, improve ad rates for many of us or sell rates and hopefully performance too. So I see Steve wandering up the hallway a little bit there. It is 4:53. It seems like a reasonable time to open the floor to questions staying in the gang here. Or take a phone call.
They are phoning it in now.
I think that's my lifeline.
As Tony Jarvis, Olympic Media Consultancy, as much as I'm a marketer, we're all here consumers. So I think, Quinn, I was almost shocked at what you said, because I think if the consumer was in the room, they would say to you and your colleagues, and in fact all of us, when are you going to ask for permission? And coming back to my British friend there, we see a very, very different environment in Europe, somewhat similar in Canada, and something very different here. And I just wonder if we keep going the way we go as marketers, are we going to face an Arab Spring revolt from the consumer?
I think it's really important to communicate to consumers why we're gathering the type of data that we are from them. It's not so that we can, know their name and address and phone number and we can, sell their information to government. It's so that we can enhance their experience and understand them better so that we can put more relevant content in front of them. So I think that it is, what we're doing now is scary to a lot of consumers. And I think the space will continue to get scarier for consumers if they don't understand why we're collecting the type of data we are. So I think that the media business as a whole has a big task in front of them to communicate these types of things to consumers so that they aren't afraid of what type of data is being gathered.
But I would also add, as a consumer, I do think it's a generational thing. And I think that what you're going to see, when I look at my son, he will press on anything in order to get to the next page. So they're going to develop opt-ins, and it's my belief that the younger generation will just opt in all the way.
Yeah.
And that and I include myself in that older generation that is careful, but I think it's going to change.
And what happens when your son goes to Yale and gets even smarter than he already is, find out what the hell is going on?
It's going to be an absolutely different world. I don't think they're
run the startup.
Yeah. But it's really no different than today. I mean, how many people have a coupon card from their grocery store? It's not like the notion of collecting consumer data is somehow a new thing because you collect it on a computer. I mean, it's not. It's just a different form. I mean, people are willing to trade their information if it's good for their pocketbook. I think the issue comes when they don't know what's happening with it. But everyone has a loyalty card for Bloomingdale's. Everyone has a loyalty card for the grocery store because they know that there's a barter that takes place. If I'm willing to share this, I'm willing to get a discount, I'll even get a coupon. I mean, so I think it's not an ignorance on the consumer side. I think the issues tend to be when there's a lack of institutional control of the data. I mean, because that's obviously a problem. But that happens whether it's a credit card company or an online institution, or when you don't know what you're doing with it. So I think that with transparency and security, it's not an issue of are they willing to. They've clearly stated there's a willingness to raise their hand. Everyone who goes to Facebook, they know that you're looking at what they're doing. It's not like it's like some big mystery when you log in, but it grows and grows and grows. Spotify, all of these services. So I don't think it's a fear of people tracking it. When people have actually shown a willingness to say, here's what I'm doing, I think that it's more of a transparency of what you're doing with it. The storytelling.
Any other questions? That question could go on for days.
How about competition among the publishers over data? I mean, yeah, you go to most people know that when they go to Facebook,
their activities are being tracked, but they don't necessarily know that when they go to another site that simply has a Facebook like this button on it, their information is being tracked. In fact, a lot of the publishers hosting that don't even know that that social bar is really sharing data. I'm curious if data is the new media, if data really is going to become a way in which publishers distinguish themselves, especially in providing first-party data. Is there a comeuppance coming at some point over how many companies are scraping data and taking data from the publishers who are supposed to be holding it?
We talked about this a little bit about first party, and as a former publisher, I certainly spent a lot of time thinking about this. Every site has a privacy policy. Most users never go to it or see it or understand it. But I think most brands are getting to that point where they have a brand promise to the people that are on their sites and on their properties, and they're starting to think that through. But RTV went from 0 to 4 billion in 4 years. That wasn't new inventory being created. That was data being collected. As a member of our biz dev team says, there's actually only first party. Third party is just data that was somebody else's first party and you've collected it somehow. And so I think, whether it's Walmart thinking about the user experience on their site or it's the Wall Street Journal, I think consumers are getting there. I think the public debate is also helping, whether it's the right to be forgotten in the UK or the White House now has a privacy policy. I think the transparency is starting to increase. I think generationally there is that issue, and I think, my family history is on my daughter's Facebook page, so you can learn everything you want about me there, but I'm reluctant to take an 800 call. So, some of this will be generational. But I think all of this, though, will prove the reason all that activity is going on, and I think this is the good news for all of us, is because the data actually is very valuable. And I think there have been some nefarious practices going on about how it's been collected and done. I think that's getting more transparent. I think it's getting clearer. But I also think, it's going to keep going because it does work. I like seeing ads about France when I'm thinking about a vacation. I don't like seeing ads about where I can get my nails done. So, but again, I may be very different than you. And so I think as we keep going down this path, we will get better at it. But I think as we're doing that, consumers are getting smarter at it because there's just such a broader public debate.
I think having panned my countrymen for being a few years behind in the traded data space, I think actually this is one area where we have led the way by necessity and because of the law. But there are plenty of exemplars in the UK, and I think I'd probably hold up the BBC as maybe the best example. People who've created a seamless experience that helps people to opt in and really helps them understand the trade that they're making in a few seconds, very quickly and once and for all. And I think it does then become a little bit like using a coupon in the store. I think that's absolutely right. I think the problem is so many of those choices are currently unconscious.
By the way, you're not allowed back after that.
All right, we are done. We've got to go a fundraiser for sending Jeff's son to Yale.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask our next panel to come in and take on the other side of this equation, data out on the issue of attribution.
Good job.
I must talk to you about eBay.
Okay, we are going to continue the discussion of data, but coming from the other end, data out. If as I said before, if data in is a dark art, then certainly when it comes to attribution, we're at a new level of wizardry. Whenever these guys, some of them were on this panel, have tried to explain to me the algorithms and the models that are used for attribution, I have to say, this humanities paper just really makes my head hurt. So, we've been talking a good game for a number of years about getting beyond last click attribution, and yet it remains a metric that continues to bedevil digital media. What is measured, what can be measured, gets measured, and very often rules the day. How far we are beyond those metrics, how we really are coming up with the kinds of models for attribution that really help make a lot of the things we've been talking about over the last couple of days. Data programmatic buying, a lot of the RTB systems, a lot of the technology that is driving the renaissance of display. A lot of this really depends in the end on it being proven out, on ways of using models that really demonstrate the complexity of attribution in a digital environment. So to take up where we are in attribution, whether we're really moving the needle and getting closer to models that make sense. To take the lead on this, I've asked Erik Huddleston, who is the EVP and CTO of the Dachis group, social business intelligence platform. Erik has been at Innovis. He founded Between Markets and was chief architect of eCustomers. Please welcome Erik.
Thank you very much. And we have a fantastic panel with us, and I'd like to take just 1 second for you to get a feeling for who we have to talk with us about the attribution conundrum. And I'll start that off with Pascal.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pascal Bensoussan. I run strategy for Aggregate Knowledge. Just 1 minute on Aggregate Knowledge. We have what we call the Media Intelligence Platform, which is a platform, a single technology platform that combines data management, audience measurement, media measurement, and attribution in one place. We believe that those things have to be integrated to be very relevant and actionable for marketers.
Thanks. Jeff?
And I'm Jeff Greenfield, co-founder and chief operating officer of C3 Metrics. We provide a full real-time attribution platform that also combines viewable impressions, and we're actually able to see through an iframe with viewable impressions and combine it all together.
I'm Dave Ragals. I'm Senior Vice President of Client Services for IgnitionOne. We're a digital marketing solutions company, global company, with the first-to-market digital marketing suite, which we're managing all your digital marketing with built-in attribution, so you're managing your media net of real-time attribution.
Hi, I'm Riff, SVP of Digital Strategy for MediaWhiz. We're a performance marketing agency focused on customer acquisition, primarily direct response. We operate in paid search, SEO, display, email, and affiliate.
And I'm Matt Wakeman, Director of Analytics for the Archer Group. We're a mid-sized digital agency. We work with a range of clients across brand advertisers and direct response type programs, and we help them both in terms of executing those programs and then in terms of figuring out what works and what doesn't.
Appreciate it. So to kick this off, perhaps we can just level set just a second. Steve framed this up beautifully, which is I think everybody has believed since I think at least the Nixon administration that last click attribution was dead. Just as a show of hands in the audience, how many people here leverage some metric other than last click attribution?
This is what we call a target-rich environment.
Three? Is that it? How many of those three are lying?
I think the last one just felt bad because I was hanging looking for some more hands. So I think that really drives home the fundamental challenge here. And maybe Dave, I can start with you. And what do you think is the challenge with adoption here?
It's these people, clearly. No, I'm not at all surprised by the lack of hands that went up. It's certainly a common problem. We rolled out our attribution system 4 years ago, which is like age of the dinosaurs, I think, probably when it comes to attribution, and no one was really ready for it. Really getting the first people to adopt it was a huge challenge, and I think there's a number of challenges. I think, and I'd be curious, who agrees or disagrees with this, and how many the folks here would say this is the biggest challenge they face. To me, it's that it's a CMO problem. but the folks managing individual channels don't see it as their problem. And it's probably so hard to get all those teams to work together. We were joking about it before. I said it's probably easier to get Midi's piece than it is to get your display and your search and your affiliate and your email folks to agree on something here. And no one really wants to take that first step within their organization. And it's something that really needs to be started at the CMO level, the top down, in order to sort of get forced upon everybody. There's a lot of upside for everybody in their own channels, and that's what we found with our clients, and I'm sure everyone else here has too. That's why we're here. If you adopt it and you push it, all, rising tide, as they say, it really is true. But I think everyone works in their own silo. It just doesn't look outside of it.
Right. Makes sense. So maybe we'll toy with Dave's self-esteem a little bit here. So maybe another show of hands. How many people sort of view the problem as one of sort of an organizational, structural problem with individuals? Do we have?
As long as it's more than 3.
Maybe I'll throw one out and then I'll throw it back to the panel. What about it's not worth it or it's an ROI issue? Do we have any of those? Is there anybody that thinks that being able to do attribution beyond last click is relevant? Okay. We'll let it digest.
Erik, I think you just raised the point, which is adoption is one problem, right? But the other question I think companies have to think about is what is the actionable impact of actually knowing what your media touch points are that consumers go through and how you attribute value to that. So I think a big question that clients raise to us sometimes, and we're in the direct response industry in the sense that our clients all they care about is the end result, right? They're not trying to necessarily build a brand, they're just trying to acquire customers in a very direct way. So the question that I always get asked is, how can you connect the impact of X media touch point to Y media touch point, or even within the same channel, let's say search marketing, for example, how can you really see how one keyword is affecting another keyword down the funnel, and then so what? Let's say you can't see it, what is the real measurable impact of that? Are you going to be able to bid up on that assisting keyword, let's say, and how is that really going to impact the business? So I think the question is not just the technical adoption of it, but also brands may just think that it's not necessarily as valuable to them in the day-to-day result.
I think what we're talking about now is kind of the minutia of it, but I think it's at a much higher level in that, last click is how digital has been evaluated for a long time. In fact, in offline, that's how everything is evaluated. When you look at marketing mix modeling that's been around since the 70s, that's all last click oriented. So, and digital is a very small part of the offline spend. And so when we go in with these very sophisticated systems and say, hey, I can improve your ROI, it's almost like I need to walk in with Tony Robbins and do a firewalk to get everyone to buy into it, because shifting from last click to any attribution system, even a simple rules-based approach, is a major paradigm for any organization. And from what we've seen, and we've been at this as long as the folks at IgnitionOne, a little over 4 years, and we've seen where we have somebody in an organization that really wants it, and someone starts a little whisper and it's primarily because they're concerned about their bonus. If we change the way we measure things, is that going to affect my bonus? Or maybe the search people are worried that their budget will be cut, and they've been around longer than the CMO, because the CMO is only around for 16 months. So it's these little whispers that get everyone a little concerned. And so what we have found that has worked over the last 6 months has been little incremental baby steps, so that you take a little step, you make one little change, everyone sees, it feels good, it doesn't hurt, the ROI goes up, and we take the next step. As opposed to being at the top of the stadium steps and saying, hey, full funnel attribution is down there, let's jump, trust me, you're not going to get hurt. Because unfortunately, when you try to push through any initiative in a big business, chances are you will be the one who will get canned. And that's what we have found is what the big issue is, even at the CMO level.
Great. So I recognize that this panel is the last thing between everybody in the room and drinking, and this topic is depressing enough that I think we'll lose the entire audience if we continue. So maybe we'll table the adoption issue, come back to it at the end, and talk a little bit about the opportunity and the advances that have been made in the space. And there's a few sort of topics around convergence in attribution that I think that we may have some enlightened opinions on. The first one that I would love to get an opinion on is the excitement around paid, earned, owned media, and both the attribution between those, particularly as we're seeing in social. So maybe Pascal, if you could give us a little bit on that.
Yeah. Well, so we are, just to be very concrete, we're working with a very large telco company that pretty much has about 6 billion touch points on a monthly basis with pretty much the entire internet. And what really makes their attribution project, their attribution analysis really worthwhile is when they can start tying together things that are usually siloed from a measurement perspective, and in particular Facebook, and the ability to cookie a user on Facebook and track a user inside or outside of Facebook on paid media, then look at them on the site if they end up visiting the site, view through attribution. Can provide some very good analysis in terms of what really works, what kind of targeting works, what are the targeting tactics and the messages that resonates well with an audience, and being able to look at that not only across paid or social media, but search clicks, retargeting, video, rich media, provide some great insights.
Fantastic.
Well, I think that's really critical in the whole approach piece, because as we see organizations and advertising budgets increasing the mix of spend that they put into digital, we see a lot more activity around digital, and so it makes so much sense to be able to track all that stuff, all of those interactions or exposures across the whole piece. One of the things that's really important, especially for like some of the clients that we work with, is, well, what are we trying to get to? What's that outcome that we're looking at in terms of how it works? And when we work in a direct response environment, when we're looking to generate leads, that kind of thing is relatively straightforward. There's still some complexity around it, but relatively straightforward to get. When we're looking at somebody who's really looking at an offline conversion, if we're talking about a retail environment or something that's totally offline, then the kind of metrics that we're looking at are going to be much more around brand attitudes and brand lift and perception and intent to purchase. And I think that's a place where we really, as we get a handle on all these different potential activities within the digital world, we need to think about how we're impacting our audiences from an attitudinal perspective.
That's great. We saw Brad Smallwood from Facebook with that exact message yesterday, indicating that maybe forget the clicks, maybe a little bit of a strong message, but this idea of the brand outcomes. So a great example would be Target, the department store chain that's moving into Canada. They're dropping a ton, I'm sure, on display advertising so that folks in Toronto know the difference between that little red Target means an upscale Canadian Tire. So what's sort of the state of the art in attribution modeling for brand outcomes when you don't have something fall in your shopping cart that you put a check mark next to?
Well, what happened for many brands is that there's always a set of activities that you can measure on the website that are high value activities. locating a store, a dealer, requesting a quote, downloading an article, watching a video, subscribing to an email, you get it. All of those can be measured and tied back to targeting tactics, a campaign, a media channel, and ultimately that's the time that yields very good insights and ROI improvements. I would say that if you're trying to just measure in isolation your brand lift and then your conversions, you're going to typically look at different targeting tactics and you're going to silo them. You're going to be looking at different campaigns and you're going to silo them, different channels and you're going to silo them. And then you're now going to try to look holistically across your funnel and understand how does those brand campaigns created an effect or a change in people searching for certain keywords, and ultimately coming to my site, doing a search for a dealership or requesting a quote. There's a sequence of events that matter, and you don't want to lose that the opportunity to bring it together.
I think historically brand advertisers have been focused on surveys in terms of the way that they evaluate response, whereas direct response is very conversion oriented. But what we're seeing with our clients is a lot of the brand advertisers are more focused on outcomes that they can measure and then attribute back to actually real money that they spend in media. So as Pascal was saying, so for example, somebody goes to an auto manufacturer site and they do a zip code lookup. Nobody leaves any information, but that's considered a high value page or a KPI that the agency is held accountable for. So the key is trying to come up with a real money value for every single one of those zip code lookups and essentially creating an NPV or net present value for each one of those. And you almost have to look at brand advertisers as what Pascal was telling you is a series of events. So you get to the site and there's actually an actual funnel. So an auto manufacturer would be downloading something about a car, configure a car online, a zip code lookup, request information, and then request a test drive. So an auto manufacturer can actually figure out a real money value on someone test driving a car. And then using typical web analytics can work back to figure out an NPV for somebody doing a dealer zip code lookup. But I think the number one biggest change with brand advertisers, which is what we're seeing a shift towards, is this concept of viewable impressions. On the buy side of media, only having to pay for ads that were actually seen online versus just served. And then on the watch side of media, only giving credit to ads that were actually seen. I think that's going to be the biggest change, because with well over 50% of all ads online not seen, most advertisers are set as of Q1 of seeing probably about a 50% lift in their overall brand response.
Well, no, I was going down the line around. Sorry about that. I want to sort of take a slightly different approach on this issue around brand marketing, because it's a huge new territory. You know, those of us who work primarily, whether it was search or display, we're used to more of a direct response background, and that's where a lot of these mediums have grown up. But you know, the brand piece is quickly adopting this, and certainly sort of creating a direct response model around brand engagement is one way, and a lot of clients have had some success with that. We work with a very large apparel retailer who has certain goals, traffic goals, that they mix in with their ROAS goals, and it's very difficult to manage. Things like zip code and those store locators can be useful for that too, but what we primarily try to steer our clients towards is really user engagement, which is another way of looking at some of these same things. And we are actively scoring all users on a client's website as they're making their way through the site, understanding what it is that they're doing, how long are they spending on certain pages, how often are they coming back, what channels brought them there, what things are they interacting with. And we're scoring those users in real time to understand their affinity and their engagement with the site. So we did a major research with Comcast Sports last year, and they really wanted to understand how both their online and their offline marketing, so their radio and TV in addition to their digital marketing, were driving people to the various local websites to create, you know, what Facebook would call a fan, but really someone who's engaged with that brand and is going to come back there for their sports news on a day-to-day basis. And by doing this based on this scoring algorithm, based on the user engagement, they could really get a feel for how they were getting engaged users. And back to your point, they could then create an ROI around understanding this is what an engaged user looks like. Here's my CPA for an engaged user. And it's based on the score. It's not based on any one particular action. And we've had a lot of success with that.
So one, just to drill down a little bit, one concrete thing that we've done for clients in the past, really, really simple, and it's probably blocking out a little bit of the bigger picture, but it gives some type of directionally correct insights. When we look at first click versus last click in terms of branded versus unbranded keywords, so think about it this way: if a consumer does a search for your brand, whether that's acme.com or Acme, as opposed to widgets, which is an unbranded term, if a consumer does a search for Acme or Acme.com, that's a branded search. If that comes as a first click, that means you're doing a pretty decent job of generating some brand awareness. And that's a direct measure that you can see that gives a little, and it's a very simple thing. You can go back and look at your analytics today and see how many of my brand searches are first click, which indicates good brand awareness, or last click, which indicates that you're generating more direct response traffic that ultimately lends itself to, they learn about the brand through that traffic that you've driven, and they ultimately convert through the branded term. So it's a very simplistic way to look at it, but it gives you some immediate insights that are actionable.
So I want to bridge the gap a little bit, because totally agree with what Jeff and Pascal were saying, especially around there's part of this concept that basically pulls from web analytics, where we talk about micro-conversions, which is any activity that somebody can do on a website. Look, searching for a store, calculating a price, adding something to their cart, going to a product detail page, any of those activities, you can take that and say, all right, those are getting us closer to whatever outcome we're trying to drive. And at the same time, when we score those, we assign them different levels of value, because we know that, all right, or we assume, one of the two, that, hey, looking for a store is valuable, but it's not quite as valuable as putting something in your cart, because the closer it is in your cart, the more likely you are to just purchase it online. What's really interesting is how you go about that scoring mechanism, right? So, for instance, we have a client where we've been focused on driving to the store locator as our primary online conversion for a while. What we've done is we've done some research and found that the people who use the store locator actually don't go to the stores that often. That's why they use the store locator, whereas there are a lot of other people who are going to the site and engaging much more in the static campaign level content, and are much more likely to visit a store and purchase during a campaign than anybody who's going to the store locator. So I think the distinction here that I want to draw is how you come up with that scoring model. You can basically develop an assumption-based scoring model where you say, okay, I think a store locator search is worth about $1, and I think that an interaction on a product detail page is worth 25 cents. And you can assign all those values in advance and say, those are my assumptions, that's how we're going to go and optimize. The other way is to do it more from a test and response analytical approach, where you evaluate responses over time and you're linking them back to the much more concrete business outcomes, and then you derive back what those values would be based on some more advanced statistics.
I'll just add that the variety of answers that you just got through in just one question just shows a little bit also the state of the attribution kind of solutions in the market. Is that it's complicated. There's a lot of things that you can be doing, and sometimes we tend to we make it a little bit overcomplicated. We try to add too many dimensions to it, too many considerations. To Jeff's earlier point, those are very good things to do when you've already been at it for a while and you've already asked kind of what are the right questions to ask. I think there are some simple things to get started with. Just one of your key conversion points, tying that conversion point back to your display or your search media. If you can track social, tie it back to your social. But then add to the scope of the upstream campaigns, add to the complexity of the type of activities, but don't necessarily jump at it right away.
You know, I just have to chime in. I have to agree with Pascal because I just sat back here, and if I was sitting out there, I'd say there's no way in hell I'm going to do attribution because I've heard more catchphrases in the last 20 minutes that confuse the shit out of me, and I have no idea what's going on. So let's just go to basics. And show of hands, how many of you are running search campaigns? Raise your hand. How many of you are also running display at the same time? You're running multi-channel, affiliate, and stuff like that. How many of you that are running multi-channel have a way to make certain that only one channel gets credit? Nobody. Oh, one. Okay, so that's the first thing is before you move from last click to attribution, you should make certain that you have a way that only one partner gets credit. You know, I think back in my head to 4 years ago when we first developed our platform, that was the problem that our client was having, was they were paying out, I always said there were 4 mothers to every conversion. And I forget now that there's still a lot of folks out there that have that. And then the other thing is that, as you heard down here, there's a lot of things you can do, but the reality is we did a study a while ago that found that 39% of the time, the last click is a branded search or an organic or a SEO. Now that's across the board for like 40 clients. But if you're a large brand, we found those numbers were higher in 80 or 90% of the time. So if you just want to start moving up the chain from last click to just improve, so you can improve your ROI, if you have some sort of methodology, use one of us or someone else, you find a way to skip any branded intention at that last click, because that's purely navigational at that point. Those pay-per-click ads to Google are purely a tax that you pay for the internet. And so if you can skip those, then you're actually getting a little more credit, which means you're actually going to improve your ROI. You're still on last click, but that would be kind of a first step, would be moving towards that. But then that way you're still able to stay within your same model. And that's simple.
So maybe I'll ask a more pointed question to the panel on that topic. So if we're just going to move how we define last click, there's some great benefits and arguments to be made. You can sort of follow the chain of logic out on that, and it's a good step. If you're not going to do that, and following pick your logic, everybody knows that particularly the farther up the funnel you go, which is the Pandora's box that you open the second you contemplate anything that isn't last click, you actually do have more than one mother to that conversion. I saw the polar bears on the Super Bowl commercial, and then they tweeted at me, and then damn, I went to the corner store and bought a Coke, and each one of those contributed to me getting there. So what's an analog to just remove the low value last clicks to move upstream to getting you a little farther down the path? And I'll look down at this end because there was lots and lots of great examples of sort of working around the dark matter in the attribution universe of not being able to link between channels.
I think that the easiest first step. I really like Jeff's idea. I think what we found with our clients, the easiest first step is to set up. First of all, let me back up the statement. This is an aha moment for a lot of people. If you're using last click, you're using attribution. That's just the attribution model you decided to use as last click. So no one is not using attribution. It's that's the model. It just happens to be the default model. So bearing that in mind, I think what we found is the best way to get people to really understand is to have another profile, another attribution profile set up where they can compare the data and really begin to understand what having something beyond a last click profile means. And so that is spreading the credit out across multiple exposures. It's perhaps tiering different channels differently based on what goes into or comes out of them. It could be changing the look-back windows, all the things that you can do to pull those levers that everyone's system can do. But by setting up another profile and pulling a secondary set of data, and then by using that and then looking at and understanding how the channels truly are working together, you've changed nothing in your day-to-day operational reporting. But you have started to really educate yourself and your bosses around how this stuff actually works. It's like a risk-free trial of doing this, where it's easy to set up. You can learn a great deal about it, and then it sparks a real good conversation. And no one has to dive even into the shallow end, let alone the deep end, from day one.
So I think one of the first things to do is take a look at analytics and actually see how many people come and convert on the first click. First, so that it becomes the first and last click no matter what. You can see a lot of people will just come to your site and they'll convert. Other folks will just disappear forever. Other folks will come, take a look around, go look at your competitors, come back 2 days later or 2 hours later, and they'll go through a series of touch points until they're ready to take action. So first thing to do is look at how many people are not just converting the first time they visit. That's going to give you a business case at least to go further. So you can say, boss, 30% of our visitors leave, and maybe they come back and convert, or maybe they just disappear forever. I'd like to be able to attribute some value to the other areas that bring them back to the site, whether that's within the same channel, different keywords within search, or maybe they see a retargeting ad down the line, that brings them back, and let's start adding value or assigning value. So first thing is to see how many people are leaving and coming back. Another thing that's maybe even easier than whether it's last click or first click is just start to attribute value by device. Whether they're coming through a mobile device, whether it's a tablet, phone, laptop, and say, guess what? A lot of the folks that come through mobile convert a heck of a lot better than they do when they come through desktop. And you start the attribution conversation, because really that's also a form of attribution. It's not where they are in the sales funnel in terms of media touch point, but that's really easy. And you can see that in those basic analytics packages, what device they come through, and you say, boss, our mobile traffic converts a lot better. We need to start attributing and assigning value to different areas of the consumer engagement. So those are just 2 recommendations.
So I've got to ask, since you brought it up and I wasn't, which is, we've talked a lot about how, frankly, challenging this whole problem set is, and one of the big tectonic forces that's at play is the dramatic acceleration of mobile as both a commerce platform and a consideration platform. And so it raises the question of what does the sort of the state of the art and look like now with solving the identity problems cross device that creates.
I think that's a hell of a sexy question for panels. It's great. Everybody, I don't think I haven't been on a sales call in at least a year where someone has not asked that question. But I've never had anyone that actually wants us to handle it, primarily because it leads to litigation. It's a privacy issue at this point. I think it's a red herring. I think that, and what's hilarious to me is that the people who usually ask it are still on last click, still giving multiple credit to multiple channels for every conversion. And I think what Adam said is fantastic in terms of examining your data and looking at all of this stuff, but unfortunately, most analytics packages don't have that rich amount of data where you can look at every single conversion and examine every single touch point along the way. I mean, DoubleClick and all of these folks, if you're lucky enough to have an ad server, limits you to 30 days. And that's not typical for most sales cycles. So I think the first problem that you have is a data collection problem and being able to bring up that data quickly enough. And then you examine it, but then you follow along and you build a case internally so that you can, run in like Paul Revere and say, hey, there's a lot of touch points here. Maybe we should be doing something about this.
Fantastic. So we're we're now well into the time. I think it would be awesome for us to get some questions out of the audience for the panel as well.
So just wanted to know, I mean, you guys talked about a lot of different ways to go about trying to solve your own kind of individual company attribution problem. It seems, and it seems like they don't all match up. So does this, I mean, is the only right way to do this to kind of have a consulting engagement per company to figure out what makes the most sense for you guys to do, and then go that way? I don't work for a consulting firm.
So we'll ask the one person with likes services the answer to that.
Yeah, I think the answer is not necessarily. I think the main challenge in getting started with attribution is, at least in our mind, is good measurement. It's being able to collect all the data that you're going to need to run your attribution. And so it starts with kind of the ability to measure your media. But you don't need like a consulting engagement to start measuring your media. You need to know what ad servers you're going to be using. You need to know if you're going to be able to tag your creatives. You need to know if you're going to be able to tag your website, and then collect all of that data. And from that point on, making sure that you have a unified way of collecting that data and tying that data together, it's the first step. You don't need a consulting engagement. I think where you can start kind of taking the next step is in setting up your attribution model. And you know, the panel highlighted some number of ways to start simple and then add complexity to it.
I know that we have 4 dissenting opinions. So let's start with Dave. And we'll see if the other 3 of you...
I wasn't necessarily completely dissenting. I would say, no, it's definitely not a consulting thing. I would say, look at it this way, and I feel very strongly about this. Attribution is a means to an end. It is not a solution to anything all by itself. It is not something that you take, sit over here, and all of a sudden is everybody's answer to everything. What are you using attribution for? That's the question I would pose back to you. What is your end? Is your end to optimize your media more efficiently? Is your end to understand how the channels are working together so that you can do better media mix modeling? Is your end to justify your program? What is that end? You have to be honest with yourself and identify what that is, and then you can come in and say, what's the best way to achieve that? I think where there's some discrepancy among this group, and healthy discrepancy, is fingerprints and snowflakes. Attribution models and the reasons for using them are like fingerprints and snowflakes. No two are alike. And there's different ways to go about this. And we all, I think, approach it a little bit differently. I think not so much a consulting engagement, but I hate to say it, I don't really mean an RFP, but really putting your questions to yourself, what do you want to accomplish, will point you in the direction of what is the right way to go about that. To Pascal's point, it's going to come down to the data. Okay, what data do I need in order to solve the riddle that I have faced myself with?
But I think the question about what data do I need, I'm going to disagree. Because we've been at this for 4 years now, and the clients that I've seen that have been successful, you need to have a stakeholder internally that is like a comm officer. Because being the attribution comm officer is the person who has the single source of truth. And even though the attribution platform is going to talk in real time to search and feed the attributed values for search or whatever bidding engine you're using, there needs to be someone there who's communicating with the search agency or the bidding engine to make certain that they're okay. And whether that is the platform that you're dealing with, that you've consulted with and you said, hey, I need X number of consulting hours, or whether you have brought someone internally. And I think one of the reasons that attribution is not catching on like wildfire and why there's probably less than 500 clients worldwide that are doing this is because most companies are expecting to go through a massive paradigm and have not sourced this out internally to add an extra person sitting there who's saying, I'm the attribution comm officer, all communication goes through me. I'm going to talk to the 7 different agencies that I'm working with to make certain that everyone is on equal footing. And so it may not be an outside consulting, but I think if you want to be successful, you need to bring in an additional person internally who is in charge of making certain that everyone has proper communication.
Last word.
I think a big part of this, I think we all agree that you can start without a consulting engagement. I'll speak for you, but whatever.
I disagree. I think you need a consultant. Just kidding.
I think a big part of this, and a reason that we're all coming at this from different perspectives, is that we work with clients who have different kinds of businesses and different kinds of online marketing programs. So the broader and deeper that your online marketing program is, the more involved you're going to need to get into the attribution modeling early on. The shorter your sales cycle, somebody mentioned the sales cycle earlier, the shorter your sales cycle, the less you need to worry about attribution. The easier it's going to be to start things off. There are some basic, I think some fundamental pieces that you can start off with in terms of how does your business compare to other businesses, and how does your current marketing mix compare to other similar marketing mix, other similar businesses, to get a sense of, all right, how far can I get into this on my own before I actually want some of that assistance.
One more quick question. Yeah.
Well, the answer won't be so.
We won't let Jeff talk.
I'm coming from the publisher side. I work for bankrate.com. And as a publisher, is there anything that we can really do to encourage our clients and our agencies to use this a better attribution model? Because we know that we are touching many consumers upper funnel. We work with financial products that are some of the biggest decisions consumers will ever make. They come to our site to learn and to build awareness. And we know that we are affecting their final purchase decision. But we're really at the mercy of the agencies. If they're not using the right model, then we're not getting credit for it. So what can we do?
Nothing. All you can, I hate to tell you this, all you can do, because we've been dealing with publishers and ad networks and DSPs for the last 4 years, and all you can do is offer to pay for it out of pocket. I mean, that may seem self-serving, but I've seen time and time again where a publisher or a DSP has reached into their pocket, spent a couple $1,000s a month, and the end result is that the client ends up spending 3 or 4 times the amount that they were spending previously. So, I mean, you can educate them as much as you want, you can show them your branding studies, but unfortunately, unless they have real-time attribution, you're sending your salespeople out there with nothing in hand to combat what the client's real-time stats are showing. So, unless you pay for it, and even sometimes offering to pay for it is not enough. We've had some networks that have been pushing some clients for 3 years, and they finally have come around. But otherwise, there's nothing else that you can do, unfortunately. Sorry.
Well, and it's all a question. So I'm going to agree with Jeff to some extent, and it's all a question of the budget that they're really spending with you. We've been working with a very large publisher, Facebook, and when you work with Facebook, and then you get their sales force involved, you get their marketing team involved, you get them to create case studies, to convince the marketers that are investing on their website, on their audience, to share the data, or at least the data that we collect on their behalf, so that they can write case studies, even if they're anonymized, but ultimately that helps kind of an exchange of value in that process. And the commercial relationship you have with a given brand is large enough, there's supposed to be a room for that.
All right. I appreciate it, guys.
Erik, gang, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We're going to adjourn to drinks down on the 5th floor. Thanks everybody over the last couple of days for great speakers, great questions from the audience the last couple of days too. And we're doing an OMMA Premium display show, a specialty show just on Premium on November 8th here in New York. So if any of you are interested in that, please talk to me. And speaking or coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.